call this meeting to order. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item C, adjustments to the agenda.
I just have one recommended adjustment, Mrs. Thomas. Would recommend that the board vote to amend the agenda by moving item J1 to immediately follow item G2.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? 5-0. Item D, approval of minutes for February 11th, 2020.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of February 11, 2020 board meeting as presented.
I'll second. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? 5-0. The minutes of February 25th, 2020.
I move that we approve the minutes of February 25th, 2020 special board meeting as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? 5-0. Public participation.
None?
None. Okay, communications and correspondence.
Communications correspondence. There are 5 letters, 4 letters of resignation, 1 letter of retirement that I will take up in my report.
Okay, thank you. Building administrator report. Mr. Clifford.
Good evening, you have my reports. And I want to start with winter sports, winter athletics, and recognize some of the teams and some of the individuals that are here tonight. So it was another successful winter sports season as all the teams made it to postseason play. And there were many individual accomplishments. Team accomplishments were cheering, they were state runner-up, and that's for the 4th year in a row. Boys basketball were regional runner-up. Boys track were PVC small school champions. And Peter Austin was Big East Coach of the Year. As far as athletes and student athletes, when I call your name, come on up. Let's start with swimming, Kaylin McPherson. So Kaylin was PVC Swimmer of the Year this year for 2020. Sean Hill, come on up. Sean was a 100-yard freestyle state champion this year. Nick Partridge, come on up. Nick is a 100-yard breaststroke state champion this year. And then the combination of Henry Sheff, Lucas Vendel, Sean Hill, and Nick Partridge. They were the 400-yard freestyle relay state champions this year. Next is indoor track. Beck Deeney. Beck was a triple jump state champion this year. Wrestling, Matt Reed. Matt Reed was a regional state champion, regional champion this year. Girls basketball, Trinity Montigny. Trinity was Big East Player of the Year, and she's the second female in Ellsworth history to score 1,000 points. And Jackson Curtis for boys basketball, he was a 1,000-point scorer also. He's not here tonight, he's on vacation in Florida. So, and Jackson and Trinity also played in McDonald's All-Star game, which was Saturday, which are considered the best seniors in the state of Maine. So give them a hand. Yeah, go ahead.
Congratulations and thank you for representing our students.
Thursday night, we have our 8th grade step-up night. For us, that's one of our most important nights, especially with the surrounding towns that have school choice, because a lot of them will go to our open house, MDI's open house, GSA, Sumner, Bucksport, John Bapps, and we compete with those schools for these kids. So we're excited to host all of them. We're expecting, probably around 150 students, and yeah, it's a big night for us. Unified basketball, we're going to talk about in a second. And senior acceptance. Sometimes you get waitlisted at the more competitive schools, and seniors find out in March, if they've gotten into those competitive schools. So we have a lot of seniors that are excited and anxious and nervous, and that's what March is for seniors. So good luck to all those seniors, and hopefully they'll get into the schools that they want to. And as far as fine arts, so all their championships are in March, and they're getting ready for them right now. So we already have some individuals that have won awards at the regional, and next school board meeting, I will bring them, as I did athletics today. But as far as their schedule is, March 14th is the Jazz Band State Championships. March 21st is the One-Act Play State Championships. And March 28th is the Show Choir State Championships. So stay tuned on Twitter or our Facebook page, and we'll let you know how they do. Any questions? Good?
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Gabinelli?
Good evening. On March 20th, we have 7 students who are competing in our Skills USA competition at Hamden Academy in UTC. This is the first time that the middle school is competing. I actually got to preview the robot that they've built today, which is pretty amazing. So they were learning how to drive it this afternoon, and they were kind of running it all up and down the hallways, which is really cool. And they're super excited of their accomplishments. And I just want to thank Mrs. Bowles and her staff. They've been a tremendous support to our kids and our staff in the preparation of preparing. They have to write resumes. They have to have engineering notebooks. So Mrs. Bowles and her staff have been very helpful to us as we enter into this new voyage. On March 7th, we had approximately 7 students attending an engineering expo at the University of Maine. They do this every March, and it was dedicated to exploring and being exposed to physics demonstrations, virtual reality crafts, and experiments. It was a pretty amazing day. Mr. Wood took these kids up, and they got to play and have a great time, and were exposed to a lot of STEM activities, so it was really cool. On February 28th, our EMS show choir earned a silver rating at the regional show choir competition that was hosted at Ellsworth High School. They did a fantastic job performing their 90s remix, and I got to hang out at a couple of rehearsals and sing along with the song, so they did a pretty good job. It was awesome, and they are going to compete in states March 27th. Our jazz band on March 4th performed at the regional competition in Bucksport, and they earned a rating of honorable mention. They just missed out on the bronze by a half a point, which is pretty amazing. And they're going to be competing in their state competition on March 21st, which is really exciting, in Westbrook. The state chess meet took place on March 7th, and our team earned the first place at UMO, so that's pretty exciting as well. We have a nice trophy that we're displaying in the office. Math Counts state competition. We have 2 students who are competing, Catherine Ford and Casey McDonald, and they're competing this weekend. So that is the state meet, and we wish them the best of luck. And our unified basketball has begun. They've been practicing twice a week, and they're making their maiden away voyage on Wednesday to Belfast. So it'll be their first away game. So we're really excited about that. They have a pretty full schedule this spring, so we're looking forward to having that and hearing how they do. And our PTF is hosting their annual Harry Potter night on March 20th from 5 to 7. We're still looking for some volunteers. So if anybody would like to volunteer, help out, we'd love to have you. Any questions? Great, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
thank you. Ms. Lewis?
Well, the high school and the middle school have done an incredible job. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We're proud of you.
Congratulations.
That's for
Thank you
darn
very much.
sure.
Nice job.
Thank
Nice job.
Just as a side note, I had Trinity in school at Beach Hill, so I feel like we contributed somehow there. She was a good kid then, she's a great kid now. Where was I? As I was saying, it's great being the feeder school for the middle school. We have kids who are excited about being involved in sports. It's winter, we want them moving, we want them active. We are blessed with Mr. Norwood, who does that very kind of thing. What used to be called Jump Rope for Heart is exactly the same thing, and it was great fun to watch those kids put out energy. What was equally as heartwarming is when we had visitors come and talk about the need for taking care of yourself and taking care of your heart. We had some seniors, and so I was there when one of the seniors was talking about having had a heart attack, and without even a pause, a little girl in the front said, "I'm so sorry, but you look like you're gonna live." Okay, yeah, great. And again, it's that kindness that we see all the time, and it's the beauty of, and the thing that keeps me passionate about being in schools, is that kind of honesty, truthfulness, and instant response that comes from their heart. Even on a bad day, we say, your heart is so good, let's pull off the layers that are bothering you today. But Mr. Norwood has provided inline skating as well as the jump rope and a variety of other things. And I tried to get one foot on the skate and decided really it wasn't worth the problem and the paperwork I'd have to fill out when I killed myself. So, but we also have chess club that we've done for the younger children, and that has been wonderful. Some of our kids have been so excited they could hardly stand it. And a variety of other activities, all of which are geared towards keeping kids moving and learning lifelong skills, things that they can employ. So I must say, when I tried to get on the skate, I thought, this is quite the dog and pony show. But today, our third graders in Heather Weymouth's class actually went to a sort of a dog and cat show at the Ellsworth American. And Letitia Baldwin had invited them to come and look through all the photos that had been sent in by community members and help select the cutest dog and the cutest cat. They were sworn to secrecy. That'll be interesting to see how long that lasts. And but when they came back, they said, "Mrs. Lewis, we tried to do a good job, and we think we know who won, but really the readers have to wait." And I thought, oh, that is so wonderful. So we're off to a good start in terms of having students be part of their community. There are lots of other things that go on. And our school is busy every minute of every day. When I do my weekly memo that Erica taught me how to do, I'll blame you. And, I list all the activities. There are never fewer than 6 of a day or an evening. That is a wonderful thing for our taxpayers to be getting their money's worth out of a school building. We see ourselves as the hub of the community, but it's absolutely wonderful when we can return this time and the space at that level. So, without further ado, I just want to apologize for Amy Bowles being sick. She has said she wouldn't follow me again, and I'm afraid it's something I did. But thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Curriculum Coordinators Report. Ms. Coleman Ramos.
Good evening. Let's see. Building on the work that we did with Joe Schmidt from the DOE in November, we're currently working on aligning social studies standards which is a little less interesting than some of the other things we've heard about. But it is important nonetheless because it is the very back end of what eventually reaches our students and gets them excited. So over a series of work time in the coming months, our social studies teachers will continue to align their work with the new standards, and they'll be refreshing and redesigning their resources and their assessments. This past summer, our social studies team wrote a vision for Ellsworth students in social studies. And Mr. Schmidt from the DOE, who's working with us, wrote me last week and asked if he could use that vision to share with other teachers, to give them an exemplar, which made me very proud, and I knew our teachers were doing a lot of good work. We're trying to coalesce departments around content, so K-12, social studies, ELA, math, and science, as well as the arts and PE, so that, and world languages as well, so that we are thinking about this across school borders and across the street from each other, and looking at how students grow throughout the district, from the very beginning until the day that they graduate. And I wanted to share it with you because I thought it was really beautifully written and thoughtful. And this is what our vision for a student in social studies in Ellsworth will be. Ellsworth School Department is committed to providing a standards-based social studies education that encourages cultural awareness, curiosity, and the ability to engage in intellectual risk-taking. We strive to foster experiences in analytical and critical communication necessary for students to be lifelong learners and positive, community-minded citizens. Students will have the opportunity to collaborate and actively listen in order to share ideas respectfully, confidently question and support arguments, organize ideas, and uncover the significance of events past and present. So having that vision, our teachers are thinking about all the ways that they can incorporate all the resources and what they've been doing now and will continue to do. So I think it's exciting, and I'm hoping that we will develop similar visions for each of our content areas so we can think about where we want our students to shine as they stay here. I'm very proud of last Friday, we had our Never Stop Learning program, where we have teachers from our Ellsworth school community share their expertise with each other. From 1 hour, from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, teachers volunteer to present something that they feel confident in to other teachers. And we have a way of signing up online. And last Friday, we had 10 different sessions, including Matt Weberly, who's our special ed assistant director, Christy Hardison, who's working with behavior. We had teachers doing topics such as national board preparation, 3D printing, use of a program called Flipgrid, special ed referrals, strategies for managing student anxiety, Wabanaki resources, math warm-up ideas, MobyMax training, how to make your classroom more LGBTQ plus inclusive, and alternative ed. I went to every single session in an hour. I should have had roller skates, except I too would have ended up in the hospital, so that's not a good idea. But it was so exciting because people were completely rapt. They were completely engaged in what they were being taught. They chose. A lot of them said to me they didn't know which one to choose. There were so many they were interested in. My presenters said that they were excited to see all the ideas that teachers were coming up with and what they brought to the table. So, I mean, we had high school teachers going to learn from middle school math teachers, and we had elementary teachers going to the high school. And so it was really exciting to see the interaction between teachers and to have them sharing those ideas. So I'm hoping that shortly you'll be seeing this in the DOE newsletter. They've been inviting all schools to send the positive ideas and things that are happening in their districts, so we'll be sending that over. We have pictures of all our teachers, and I do want to thank them all because they did a beautiful job. So we finally have arrived at a model. Instead of trying to do it after school when a lot of teachers can't stay, we're using 3 times on Fridays over the course of the year for teachers to share and learn from each other. And it's really building a stronger teaching community, which I think is something that will help our teachers know that they really want to stay here. So very excited about that. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Item J1, student presentation.
Good evening. I have a couple of handouts.
Pretty good accuracy, Mr. Clifford.
Thank you.
You haven't lost your touch.
So good evening. I'm Josh Frost, the athletic administrator at Ellsworth High School. And I want to talk to you a little bit about our unified basketball and cheering programs we have. So a little history. Unified basketball partners students with developmental disabilities with students without developmental disabilities to train, compete, and represent their school. Unified Sports impacts all kinds of students and helps promote physical activity, teamwork, sportsmanship, and social inclusion. Our Unified Basketball program began in the 2016-17 school year. This was supported the first 2 years by a grant we received from the Special Olympics of Maine. This purchased uniforms, officials' fees, coaches' stipends, and other travel expenses. The last 2 years, very thankfully, it's been supported by the school budget. So this is our 4th season of Unified Basketball, and we have 15 students participating on the team this year. Our coaches are John McDonald, Lori Fortier, and Katie Lacasse. During the inaugural season of 2016, we played 6 games, 3 home and 3 away. We did not play in the NPA playoffs. Back then, there was a very big push for winning a gold ball in unified sports, and that sense has gone away. So instead, that first year, we played our first annual staff versus unified game, and I'm pretty sure the unified team won, as they have every year. This year, our 4th annual unified versus staff game is scheduled for Monday at 3. The last 3 years, we've played 8 games, 4 home, 4 away, and since then, because we don't go on to the playoffs, we've been invited to the Courageous Steps Project Unified End of the Season Festival. It's kind of a mouthful, at Orono High School. And that's this Friday, and that was handed out to you. And that information's on our Facebook pages and whatnot. Anyone at home can go there and see the information on the good events that's happening on Friday. Also, the last few years, we've been able to live stream our home unified games. So thankfully, parents or grandparents or friends, aunts and uncles, and fans from away can see the games live on Facebook. Another added opportunity this year is the Maine Basketball Hall of Fame has added a unified classic, and this year it will be at the Pit at the University of Maine. That's the other flyer handed out. There's 6 teams participating that night. We play at 6 o'clock against our rivals MDI, which I'll note that they beat us by 1 point last week, and we play them tomorrow night in a rematch game. This is also the 2nd season that we've had unified cheering. This year we have 6 students participating. The cheerleaders cheer at all the home games and do a halftime dance routine. I'd like to thank Melanie Omler-Fox and Kat Dickens, who are our varsity cheerleading coaches. They volunteer their time to come in and see that team, oversee that team, and help them with practices and whatnot. And finally, one of the highlights of this year has been the addition of the halftime dance parties. I'm not sure how this all started, but instead of halftime talks in the locker room, we have halftime dance parties. So we invite players, coaches, fans, athletic directors, and they can be seen dancing to the Cha-Cha Slide, the YMCA, and the Whippin' Nay-Nay, which I've learned that dance, apparently. And finally, I'd like to add, too, that we have a lot of alumni from the unified programs that are coming back and watching the games, which is really nice to see. Wyatt, obviously Jen's son, was on the first team. There's probably only 2 points he scored in basketball ever, maybe. But it's great to see that these...
In his high school career.
Yeah. It's great to see, the students coming back and still supporting the program that they went through. So I do have some guests here tonight. I'm going to call them up and just have them kind of talk about their experiences. So if you want to come up, we have Abby and Michaela and Sam and Ella. So who would like to go first? Michaela's going to go first. Yes. So Michaela's she's been waiting for this all year. She's a senior, so this is her 4th year. She's going to be back with us next year and be able to play again. So she's been with the program since it started. Her nickname is Buckets because that's all she does is make buckets, right? Am I giving away too many secrets?
Yes.
She has a phenomenal three-point shot. So, go ahead. You don't have to say how great I am.
So, my name is Michaela. This is my fourth year playing unified basketball. I've enjoyed my coaches, Mr. Wibbly, Miss Reardon, Miss Fortier, Mrs. Lacasse, and Miss McDonald. Thank you to Mr. Frost and the rest of the staff for giving great support for our unified team. I've enjoyed and had fun with our players, partners. We have all learned how to pass the ball to everyone. I consider everyone I have played with a great friend.
Hi, I'm Sam Haller. So when I first heard about the Unified program, I was a junior last year, and I thought it was a really good idea. So this year I just decided to join the program, and so far I've had nothing but a good time, and I think it's a really good opportunity for the players as well as the partners to make connections. And from what I've seen, at the end of the day, everybody is looking forward to playing with the team, doing practices, going to games, and so far I've only gone a couple games without Michaela trying to get me going at the dance parties at halftime. So yeah, it's a good atmosphere. I think it's a good program, and I think if it's possible in the future, we could do maybe intramural, more unified programs for different sports. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Abby, and I'm representing Unified Basketball from Ellsworth High School. Unified is fun and amazing because we get to make new friends each year, and these guys are amazing friends to me, and I couldn't ask for better friends. It gets me out of my comfort zone and better get to know the staff and the coaches and stuff like that. It's a great program to join and to watch, and we love to see all the fans. Thank you.
My name is Ella Hubbard, and I'm a junior at Ellsworth. And I have wanted to do Unified since freshman year, and I was at MDI a few years ago, and I just never made the step, I don't know. And this year I emailed Mr. Frost and asked if I could, and I have met all kinds of people that I didn't know, and I've developed good connections with them, and I like being able to say hi to them in the halls. And I'm looking forward to doing Unified next year, and hopefully in the future we can do more Unified stuff like Sam said. And yeah, thank you.
So Mr. McDonald's also here tonight. Would you like to add anything, or do we cover it all? Or he's got some note cards, I see.
Touch a few bases. First of all, I just want to say how proud I am of the representatives of the team. They really pleased me tonight. Took a lot of courage on a number of their parts, and I'll brag about even going a ball to the other kids. Okay. I just also, the last lady who spoke, you know, it was difficult for her to come up with the words for this meeting. And we already heard what a great three-point shooter Michaela is. But Abby, if you were at the game the other day, she had the guard at one time at the point of the game. We only lost by a point, I think, right? a gentleman who was 6'5", and she did it perfectly. She is stubborn, and she gets a lot out of this program, and puts a lot into it as well. Okay. All right. All of these kids, particularly the players, I think what they need is a sense of belonging, and that's where, they get it in this program. And the partners, yes, they like to say hello in the hallways. I see them, they come up, give them the high fives, but it isn't just during the season, it's all year long. Those two girls wear their unified sweatshirts about every day to school. They're proud, okay? So that's what it's really all about. You covered that. Boy, you covered a lot of ground very well. But the other thing is, what are they learning from this? I think a lot of it's the loyalty. They learn to be loyal to one another, trustworthiness. This is educational. And I see these people being great citizens. You represent the town. They all have the capability of being fine citizens. So I love them, I love the program, and yes, we need other types of activities, as Sam was saying. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So any questions or comments?
There's a home game tomorrow, correct?
There is a home game tomorrow, MDI, 3:30.
3:30.
No admission. Come and support.
Good. I overlooked, and something real important.
Do you want him to come to the podium? Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on.
The life skills. No, it'll only take a second. The life skills members of our team, to give you an idea of how hard they work, not just on the court, every one of them made the honor roll. And, yeah, real proud of that.
So yes, tomorrow, 3:30 MDI. This Friday at the Courageous Steps Project End of the Season Festival up at Orono High School. And that's a two-day thing. We're only playing on Friday night at 6 and 7 o'clock. Our cheerleaders are also going to that to support the team. And then next Wednesday at the Pit at UMaine, 6 o'clock again against MDI. Hopefully that's the rubber match game, we'll see. And we're trying to get the pep band to go up for that too, so.
Sweet. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the last thing I'll say is, I know a lot of you have attended those games, and just inviting people to the community, because you could have the worst day in the world, but then you attend one of those games and everybody walks out smiling, and it's just it's a great hour, it really is to spend with them.
It is.
It's fun to watch.
Thank you.
Mr. McDonald and all the players, thank you very much for coming tonight and presenting. I can't tell you how, I can't speak on behalf of the board, but I think I am, how proud we all are of representing the program, the school, your families. You do a tremendous job, and we're very proud of you. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Superintendent's report.
I feel kind of sad there was such a big crowd here before it was my turn, but it's okay. I'm going to kind of go in reverse order with my report that was distributed to you folks. First of all, I'd like to address the letters of resignation and retirement. 4 letters of resignation. First, Amanda Skeet, Ed Tech at Ellsworth Elementary Middle School. Josh Balarjan, custodian at Ellsworth High School. Catherine Hall, music director, EEMS Show Choir, and Hillary Lizzie, EEMS special education teacher, have all resigned their positions. And we've been hearing it for a couple of years, but none of us ever thought it would happen. After 39 years, Beverly Long, currently serving EEMS administrative assistant. I think she is also one who worked at the Knowlton School, the Moore School, what was the old middle school, and probably every other school in the city. But after 39 years, she has decided to retire. And we certainly thank her for all her years of service to the students and the community. Since our last meeting, we have hired 2 new staff members, 2 new ed techs at Ellsworth Elementary Middle School, Holly Hersom and Elis Set. And with regard to the balance of my report, I'm going to kind of liken it to what Mrs. Corman Ramos said. The information that I'm going to present is probably not as exciting as what was presented in some of the previous reports, but it's certainly important and interesting and necessary. So I'd like to talk first with regard to the coronavirus situation that has taken place and provide an update not just to the board, but also to members of the community. First thing I would like to do is to briefly review a letter that was sent out to all of our staff members, parents and guardians of all Ellsworth Department students back on February 3rd. And the reason I want to review those pieces is because even though there is still, as of noon today, no confirmed or presumed cases of coronavirus in the state of Maine, it's still imperative that we continue to take the preventative and proactive measures to help prevent the spread of not just coronavirus if it does appear in Maine, but also all other viruses, influenza and so forth. So one of the first things I'd like to talk about is, in our school, what are we doing? And as I go into this, I'd also like to express appreciation to all of our staff in our schools for stepping up and really being part of making sure that we take the appropriate measures. And that's all staff members. First is the custodial maintenance staff. They always are doing a great job cleaning our schools, but they are emphasizing heavily the practice of cleaning regularly high-touch surface areas such as desks, door handles on a daily basis, and we've actually expanded that to more than a daily basis. I know our administrators are working with other staff members on how we can implement that on even a more regular basis. I see Mr. Saunders here this evening. Transportation Department is working on continuing to clean their bus seats and windows, not just on a daily basis, but sometimes in between runs. Increasing the availability of alcohol-based sanitizers in our schools and on our vehicles used to transport students. While hand washing, which I'll talk about in just a minute, is still the most appropriate and best method for your hands, not everybody can get to a sink, not everyone can get to where the antibacterial soap is, so we're increasing the availability of those alcohol-based hand sanitizers at the entrances to our schools and making sure that they're available when we have public events. Starting tomorrow, we'll be providing on our website and Facebook pages links to some up-to-date information from the United States and the Maine CDC websites, and that is for staff, parents, guardians, and members of our community. Would also mention at this time that in our conversations with department heads on the municipal side of government, the city website is also including links to a number of resources. Again, would like to appreciate the efforts of all of our staff, our school nurses and all staff, for reviewing and reminding all students of the proper hand washing protocols. Those are emphasized in the school. And cough hygiene practices. I'm trying to think back to being a student in grades 2 or 3 and remembering cough hygiene. I don't ever remember it, but certainly it's an important piece. Our staff's doing a great job. We're still discouraging the sharing of food in any way, shape, or form. And our school nurses, and this is part of a regular requirement, they are monitoring attendance based on what are illness-related absences and other absences, not just for reporting to the DOE through NEO, but to ensure that we're tracking any potentially influenza-based absences. And again, that's our school nurses and administrative assistants, because for all you parents out there, when you call in to let us know that your children are absent, you're going to be asked a question. You're certainly not required to provide the information, but please know the reason we're asking it is we're trying to track that information so we can know the level of illnesses that are influenza-related. The other thing that we're continuing to do on a daily basis is to work with our county, city, and state officials to monitor the situation as it develops and to support our students and staff in the best health practices moving forward. And as I'm sure you all know, this is a very fluid and quickly emerging situation, but one of the keys is to stay on top of the information that's out there and make sure that there's strong communication. What can our families do at home? And this goes to our staff as well. If you have your children exhibiting flu-like symptoms, and we're talking fever of, I believe, over 100.4, correct me if I'm wrong on that, anybody? 100.4, isn't it? Good question. It's a quiz question. Or respiratory symptoms, excuse me. Keep your students home. And if it's a fever, make sure that they stay home for 24 hours after the fever goes away without the use of acetaminophen, ibuprofen. The same goes for our staff members. We encourage our staff members to stay home if they exhibit the same types of symptoms. We would like parents to please continue to remind their children to exercise the proper cough hygiene and hand washing hygiene. Remind your children to avoid touching their nose, mouth, and eyes, since that's one of the ways that germs are prevalent in getting into the body. As we're doing in the schools, clean and disinfect frequently, touch surfaces and objects. And make sure that you have plans in the event that there is potential for community spread of the virus or the potential that cases emerge. Make sure you have a plan for a caregiver, such as a family member or neighbor, if you're unable to stay home with a sick child. And maintain awareness of the regular school communications channels. And again, the communication that we'll be providing is through our website and through our Facebook pages, and also through the Infinite Campus system where people can receive messages through either phone, text, or email. Okay. And again, that is from the letter from February 3rd, but just a brief update because there are still some questions that people have. First is, we do continue to work collaboratively with the local municipal government and local emergency agencies, such as the school health advisor for our school department, the Maine Department of Education, who has an outstanding resource on their website, the Maine CDC, and Hancock County Emergency Management. We're also working cooperatively with the municipal side of government. Okay. And again, as I said a few minutes ago, at the time of this report, as of noontime today, there are still no confirmed or presumed cases of COVID-19 in the state of Maine. And as we're all aware, however, testing has now been expanded into Maine, and the expectation from the officials out there is that there will likely be confirmed cases reported in our state. So we need to be continuing to be vigilant on the preventative measures that we have in place. Now, should this be the case that cases are confirmed in Maine, we will continue to rely on the guidance from those resources and agencies mentioned to support our decision-making locally. We have been receiving some questions regarding the potential cancellation of school-based and co- and extracurricular activities, some questions on school closures, and questions on travel. And as I know, we have a couple of trips that are on the agenda here in a little bit. Let me just address those pieces. For all of those situations, I will reiterate, we're consulting with the appropriate resources, for the most part, the Maine DOE and the Maine CDC, to make sure we have the most updated factual information and guidance to inform our decision-making. So with regard to extracurricular activities, you heard about the unified basketball game tomorrow night. At this time, I also heard this on the news at 6 o'clock before I came downtown, the governor reiterated it, there is no guidance in our area to begin to cancel public activities such as ball games and so forth. Okay. So we are not doing that. However, we will continue to monitor the situation, and also we communicate with other schools here in Hancock County to make sure that we're on the same page. So certainly if we have any outbreak of a virus or community spread evidence, we will revisit those decisions. But at this time, we're not planning to issue a widespread cancellation of those activities. In terms of activities that require travel, we have a number of those coming up. You heard Mr. Clifford and Ms. Gabbianelli talk about regional and state level competitions. What we have asked our administrators to do is to reach out to the schools that are hosting those events and ask them to keep us in the communication loop in the event that those activities are going to be canceled or held without crowds or things of that nature. Based upon the information we've received so far, there was one event in southern Maine where one school has opted not to travel, but to my knowledge, nothing else has been canceled at this point in time. Again, please stay tuned on that. With regard to school closure, this is one of the pieces that I think if people rely on things other than the factual information, there can be widespread concerns of a school closure. Currently, the likelihood that we'll be issuing a closure of our schools for an extended period of time is minimal. However, in the event that it becomes necessary to consider that, the guidance we're receiving right now is we will be working directly with the DOE and the Maine CDC to make a decision as to whether schools are closed. Certainly, the ultimate decision will be made locally, but we'll be relying on that guidance. As vacation season approaches, or in some cases, it's already arrived for people, we're also working to obtain up-to-date guidance on the best practice for us in our schools for working with families who travel either to locations where there are cases that have been confirmed or who are traveling abroad. And again, this can be a bit of a challenging issue. I know we've had a couple of situations in our schools where we've had families who have traveled, not to a country where there have been confirmed cases, but have traveled. And we've had the families work with us very closely in our school nurses to make sure we're monitoring students who have traveled for a 2-week period in our schools for symptoms. I think it's very nice that we've got cooperation from the families, but we're working to make sure that we have appropriate guidance because we know April vacation is coming. There are going to be a lot of people traveling. We want to make sure that we're being proactive. In closing, I'd really like to say, again, I am appreciative of the efforts of all of our Ellsworth School Department staff to reinforce and support the proactive and preventative measures designed to reduce the spread of influenza and other seasonal viruses and COVID-19 if it does materialize. And also would encourage all of you out there, school board members, members here, members of the public, rely on the factual information that's available to us in gathering your information with regard to COVID-19. I encourage you to check in regularly with the resources that we're posting on our website. We will update them as we can, but also particularly go to the Maine Centers for Disease Control website. It's an outstanding resource. So I know that was a lot, members of the board, but are there any questions? Anything you'd like me to reiterate, refresh?
No, but can I comment on that real quick and commend? So my first grader came home today and told me about the hand washing exercise they did today. About the teacher had glitter on her hands, and then she shook the hands of each of the kids, and then they could see that was supposed to symbolize the germs, and then they went and scrubbed it all off, and I didn't see a piece of glitter on her, so she must have washed well. That was so innovative and fun for the kids, and she knew exactly why. It was a great conversation, and so it was really, really neat to see. So
Thank you for sharing that
Love it.
example. And
Love
that's
it.
one example of many across the
Yeah.
school department that our staff members are doing.
fun way for first graders to get that in their head.
So did she mention to you the amount of time that she's supposed to wash her hands? That's another one I've heard.
Oh, yes, to sing, for 20 seconds, to sing happy birthday, and she sometimes sings it 2 or 3 times. She likes water, so we're good. We're fine. But it's great. I thought that was really innovative, so fun.
Okay, the second topic I would like to talk about is traffic flow and parking at EEMS. So Mrs. Lewis, Ms. Gabinelli, I'm going to put you on the spot for a couple of minutes. And members of the board, in your packets, you should have received my report, and you should also have received a little schematic drawing with what probably looks like hen scratching on it. I hope you can read it, but we'll cover that here tonight.
Yep.
So what I would like to do is just talk briefly that back in the fall, late August, early September, Mrs. Lewis, Ms. Gabinelli worked with Mr. Saunders, who's here tonight, and Mr. Turnbull to implement some procedures and protocols with regard to parking and traffic flow at EEMS, in particular during our morning drop-off and afternoon pickup times. And I think they did an admirable job of implementing some protocols and procedures that helped. However, as the year has gone on, we've had some reports coming in from parents that are safety-related concerns, and by the way, to the parents who came forward, thank you very much. It's always wonderful when we have parents come forth and share concerns and information with us. So in response to those concerns that were brought forth, Mrs. Lewis, Ms. Gabinelli met with the parents who came forth. They also included Director of Facilities and Maintenance Chuck Turnbull and Officer Amy Torrey of the Police Department to talk about those concerns and ideas for potential improvements. Since they have met, I've also met on a couple of occasions with Police Department Chief Mosier and Fire Chief Tupper to discuss potential options, including the ones that we're putting forth here tonight. And these have their blessing and support. And please know, before I turn it over to these ladies, that our primary interest is the safety of students, staff, parents, and visitors. So, Mrs. Lewis, Ms. Gabinelli, didn't give you a lot of time to prepare, but could you talk briefly about the protocols that you put in place back in the fall? And when you're done with that, I'm going to follow up with some things that we're going to add to that.
I'm going to start, it'll take just a couple minutes more, but I'm going to start back a little further than that. A year ago, last fall, we want everybody to be excited about getting to school. We don't want it to be in a positive way. And when we started last fall, we said to everybody, safety is our primary concern. And we'd heard stories about how, since the school was built, there had been concerns about the parking and about dropping off and that sort of thing. We have 850-plus kids. I got the number right tonight.
Thank you.
And, some of our kids, very few of them, walk to school. That's a concern when you have traffic and you have children who are crossing. We do have a couple of crosswalk people there, but you never know what kids are going to do. So people driving need to be paying attention They need not to be worrying about whether they left late for work or not. They need to be watching for the children. They are little kids and they're big kids. The little ones sometimes don't pay attention. Even when they are walking with their parents, they dart out. So we sent out, and God bless Mrs. Gabbianelli, she got everything out on Facebook. But a year ago, last fall, we sent out information saying, please help us. We want your children to get here safely. We want that to happen. Now, some of the kids walk, and as I mentioned, it's not many. Many of our children ride the school bus, and Mr. Saunders is an enormous help with that. And that traffic flow does not appear to have any issues with it. But because there are so many families who do not send their children on the bus, what we do have is long lines of traffic waiting to get in. Last fall, after talking to parents both informally and meeting with them, we implemented a one-way around past the school with at the end of that road a sign that says, "One way, do not enter." Evidently, that's challenging for some because they continue to do that. That is a safety issue, and we address that over and over again. We also have parents who need to come into the school, want to come into the school with their children, and they need to park. We have increasing numbers of students, which means we have increasing numbers of staff, which means we have increasing numbers of vehicles to get staff there. There are limited numbers of parking spaces, so we asked parents, and we reiterated again this fall, could you please park in the softball parking lot? We had parents who were extremely frustrated saying, there's not enough parking. We said, we know that. There does not appear at this point in time to be an availability of more space where we could increase the parking. Therefore, you may have to stay in that loop. Be patient, be kind, and be safe were the messages that we sent out. And for the most part, we found that that was abided by for sure. And parents don't want anything bad to happen. But when they're in a hurry and they're late for work, sometimes they get a little antsy and the kids don't get out of the car quite as fast as you want them to. So while you're trying to get them off to a good start in the day, honey, have a good day. Get out quick. You know, there are lines of traffic behind me. One of the other issues that we had was parents dropping their children off on the driver's side, which meant there were vehicles coming by them. We have 2 staff members, and often I am in the cafeteria watching out through those doors. And those 2 staff members try to guide that traffic quickly, safely, carefully. And parents who need to drop their children off and come in, try to park down by the softball field. Doesn't always work out that way, but we work on it. Staff members have been asked this year to park as much as they can in the other end parking lot. And again, not be on the side road. The middle school people sometimes park on that road. And for the most part, people are really good about this. When they're not, they're really not, though. And they get anxious and they get angry. And we had some of the same parents, God bless them, that came to see us last year and said last year when we designated parking for the Ellsworth School Department vans, that meant that population of children was a little more safe. We encourage parents to drop those kids off quickly and safely. Say your goodbyes before you get to the school. And then when you get out, the kids just have to get out on the safe side. And so for the most part, that got better. But it's human nature that sometimes gets in the way of things. And despite some of our best efforts, it's been challenging. The parents who came back to us this year said, okay, how about painting lines? How about enhancing sort of notification for parents where they can be, where they can't? And we said, yeah, we're going to do that. And Mr. Trumbull worked right with us. We talked about some other ideas that we thought might help increase that safety factor. It is huge. There is nothing more tenuous than parents who are trying so hard to have their kids have a good day at school, but starting it off with, hurry up, okay, we got to get going. There are people coming, oh, don't open that door, you know? And so we continue to work on that. Ms. Gabbianelli.
I would just echo that sentiment. I mean, our motto is kindness starts with me. And as adults, we really need to be modeling that for our students. We have a couple of hardworking staff members who are out there every morning trying to help direct traffic, and they take the brunt of the anger and sometimes the profanity that is being used in front of our students. And I think we just all need to remember that kindness starts with me, and we need to take a breath, and it's gonna be okay, and we can get kids into the building safely. I'm not out there as much as Mrs. Lewis or see what goes on, because I'm in the gymnasium with the middle school kids at that time. But yeah, we would like just to work together and work with parents and have that sense of community, not just inside our building, but outside in the parking lot as well. So I echo Mrs. Lewis's sentiments about making sure that we just take a little bit extra time in the morning and in the afternoons when we're picking up and dropping off, and work together to make it a safe environment and model positive behavior for our children.
Anything we left out?
No, I don't think so, but you may be called back up when I finish, which won't be that much longer.
Okay.
So
Do you want us to just stay here?
You can do that, Mrs.
Okay.
Lewis. So, thank you. Mrs. Lewis and Ms. Gabon mentioned a couple of things. One is with regard to painting and enhancing the markings there. Mr. Trumbull has already committed to that when the weather improves, and they will be making sure that areas that need to be painted and repainted will be done so that they're clearly visible. The other piece with the two staff members that we have outside, we have ordered or are ordering a brighter colored vest and also stop signs for them to use. And I would echo, although I'm going to say it again, we need for everyone who's coming into the school, pickup time, drop-off time, or other, when those staff members are out there, to please follow their directions. They're doing their best, and their purpose is for safety of not just students, but staff, parents, and visitors. So the things that are going to go into place that hopefully will help with the traffic flow, because one of the other things that Mrs. Lewis didn't mention, she did mention where Newitt Circle is, and that is the drop-off loop where there's a parking lot in the middle, right up by the main entrance. There's only one way that you're supposed to enter that. It's by the entrance that's closest to the main entrance to the school. The other end of that is exit only, and there is a sign there. So that's supposed to be one way. Okay. What's going to change, however, from 7:15 a.m. to 8:15 a.m., and from 1:45 p.m. to 3:15 p.m., we are going to implement a one-way entrance to the school property, which is the Pond Avenue entrance. And for people who aren't sure where Pond Avenue is, although most people are, it's the one closest to the Mill Mall and the YMCA. That will be the only entrance to the school. So people who enter that way can access the Newitt Circle Loop. Okay? They can also access the softball field parking lot. Okay? When they exit the school, the only way out from those time periods, 7:15 to 8:15 in the morning, 1:45 to 3:15 in the afternoon, is the Shore Road access point. So enter Pond Avenue, exit Shore Road. Okay? One of the things that happens is we still have a number of people who enter in the morning the Shore Road entrance. That adds to the congestion that comes up around getting into the drop-off loop and the pickup loop. So hopefully this will eliminate that.
Might I also add too that that will eliminate parents dropping off quickly and picking up quickly at the end of the day their middle school students on that Shore Road. So that will keep kids a little bit safer as well.
Absolutely,
Sorry.
because that's taking place morning drop-off and afternoon pickup. So when people are exiting the parking loop where they drop off or pick up, they're going to be directed to go towards the Shore Road and go back into traffic that way. When they're exiting the softball field parking lot, they're also going to be directed to go to the Shore Road. Okay. Had a conversation with Chief Mosier and Chief Tupper, as I mentioned earlier. They are both supportive of this plan. They believe it's a good idea. A couple of things we ask parents to be cognizant of, however. Even though it's one-way traffic when you're coming in from Pond Avenue, please stay to the right-hand side of the road. And the same thing when you're exiting towards the Shore Road, please stay to the right-hand side. We need to ensure that there is access for emergency vehicles. Okay. The other thing, Chief Mosier has pledged that on Monday when we start this, he is going to try to have an officer or two on hand to support us in those efforts. Again, we hope that that one-way traffic flow will help minimize the congestion that occurs and eliminate some of the issues of students who are being picked up and dropped off at all points from the entrance on Pond Avenue to the entrance on the Shore Road. As Ms. Gabinelli said, we have kids who are getting out of vehicles and getting into vehicles all through that area, and that's just not a good thing. The other piece that we ask is that people please pay attention to our staff members who are out there doing the best they can. So some other pieces also to do, please abide by and follow stated protocols and procedures. Okay. Keep your speed below 5 miles per hour. In my conversation with Chief Mosier earlier today, what he said was, please remember, Dan, that for every mile per hour that you're traveling, it's a foot that requires you to stop. So even if you're paying attention, you have to stop at 5 miles an hour. It typically takes you 5 feet to stop. With kids moving as quickly and fast as they can, 5 feet is not a lot of space. Please do not release students from vehicles unless you're in the drop-off loop or if you're parking in one of the parking lots and walking into the school with them. As Mrs. Lewis mentioned earlier, students dropped off in the loop, please exit from the curbside door or the passenger side doorway. Okay, that eliminates getting out where there are cars going by. Park only in the designated parking lots. Another challenge that we have is people who are parking along the roadways, people who are parking in the food service and custodial area where we often have pickups and deliveries. Okay. Please don't park there and do not park in the handicap access spots or the school van designated spots. And please, we encourage you, it's a lot of traffic flow in a small area, and Mrs. Lewis is right. The space availability to expand parking or expand traffic flow does not exist on that footprint. Not only do we have athletic fields, we have wells for the geothermal system. There's not room to increase or enhance that. So we really require patience and courtesy to fellow drivers and to students, and safety is the ultimate goal. So in advance of these changes being implemented on Monday, we appreciate in advance your cooperation in abiding by these protocols and practices and ensuring the safety of everybody involved. Mrs. Lewis and Ms. Gabinelli have been preparing a letter that's going to be going home, and we will be including this new information in that letter as well. And would you like to close with anything? You already did it, but if you'd like to reiterate the kindness piece, because I think it's critical. It's been something that across our school system with Rachel's Challenge, the Friends for Rachel Club, and all of those efforts, I think is important and imperative to emphasize that goes for all of us.
That is true.
I would like to just add one more thing, that please also, when you pull into the loop, make sure you pull up as far as you can, because we have some parents who are just kind of stopping and it hinders the flow of traffic as well. So that was one thing I forgot. But the kindness piece, we have students in our school all day long who are exhibiting kindness, and we recognize those efforts from them, and they're an example for all of us. They do a wonderful job spreading that kindness within our school, and hopefully we can spread it in the parking loop as well.
And I would just add that I saw a sign recently that I absolutely loved. It said, "Slow down, dumb dogs and fast kids." And I thought to myself, I don't know that I need the dumb dog part, but I really would like to have the fast kid part. And I think those children that we have, as Erica was saying, who are kind and good and gentle with each other, are learning that from somewhere. And we want to thank the parents who are modeling that for their children. And we just want to remind everyone else that your work week is busy, but their work week starts when you drop them off. And if there's tension and hubbub and anger and some of those kinds of things, that's not positive. But for the majority of parents, we need to thank them for really working at being safe. And for the parents who continue to work with us and will continue to give us feedback, thank you very much.
That was a lot of information on the second topic. Questions?
I have a question. So if you are a parent who's parking to drop off in the morning, and you really should be parking at the softball parking lot, is that what you're asking? So if you're going to enter one way and you're going to come in, are you going to go through the loop and straight across, or through Newitt Circle and then down?
Talked with Chief Mosier about that. So when you're entering Pond Avenue, if you're going to go into the parking loop, you obviously go straight through up towards the main entrance and turn into Newitt Circle on the main entrance end of it. If you're going to go into that parking lot, that short stretch is a one-way stretch to get into it.
So you can still use that
You can still
piece
use that
to go
just to get in there.
Yeah.
But when you come out, if you're coming out after
You're
that,
going
you come
to
out and go down the shore road.
towards the shore road.
Yep,
So,
because if we made people go all the way around that parking loop just to get in that would create more
Right,
congestion.
that's what I was worried about.
So we don't want to have that happen.
okay. And then is there any way, I noticed in the mornings, is there any way to make Newitt Circle just for visitors? And make you know, like if there's, I mean, obviously, you have your handicap spots, you have,
Mean the parking in Newitt Circle?
Parking in the middle of Newitt Circle. Yeah, I think we'd have to look at the number of people who park there, because another piece that has historically been a problem since this facility has been in this layout that it is, and this is typical when you're dealing with state-funded construction projects. It doesn't fund enough parking. Now, that's
Right.
complicated by the fact if you look at the footprint of the property, there's not enough space. So I think that's something we would have to take a look at, because I know that we have a number of people who park there in the morning. Sometimes there are parents there. Sometimes there are people who are coming in for, say, an IEP meeting or a team meeting or a parent meeting. There are some of those people that park there, but
Just
I
wondering-
don't know the ratio of whether that's staff members.
how many,
parents,
how many spots are there, maybe all day, you know, full all day, where that softball parking lot could be more staff overflow, and the middle be just for guests, visitors, somebody there for a meeting, dropping off.
I think that's a good question. That's something that we can look at further.
So the elementary school I went to had a very similar bus circle. And we were in a much more crowded, congested subdivision without much, space surrounding the school. They had their staff parking. Their staff had to come in before the buses, and where that loop is, that's where they had staff parking, here and over here. It was actually done in two circles, and it worked very, very well. That one loop, do we have any wells or our air return system there?
Where the buses.
I'm trying to visualize.
I
where you-
know, it's really kind of weird. And as I said, if I hadn't grown up with it, I probably would not. But basically, I would suggest, because I think we need more staff parking, especially staff who maybe it's not good for them to park way back there. Do you want to pass that down?
Yep.
I would start there, and then if we have the rest of that available for the other side.
Up here in the buses.
That's how it was done in my elementary school in Florida.
Okay, I see what you're talking about.
I don't, of course, obviously, I say this without knowing what's
Yeah,
underground
understood,
there.
Understood. I don't believe there are any wells there, but it's certainly something that can be looked at.
Because I noticed we don't have a curb up there to overcome.
Yeah.
But it would be good for some of our staff too, who have to walk a very long way from the staff parking lot, to move those people up there first, just to give more staff parking back there. Also, it's obvious that when the architect designed the school and designed the loop, it appears to me that they were not planning on vans, they were planning on one school bus delivering certain kids, and that would be in the loop. Obviously, that doesn't work the very best to our students. The vans work much better. But whoever did this didn't really plan for those vans. If we did a cut through right here for those vans, and I'm once again, I say this not knowing if there's absolutely any money to do this, okay? I mean, and money does not grow on trees, but would that not be a possible solution to bring our vans in here?
By the way, thank you both for the questions, suggestions. I would say send that down as you're doing.
I'm sorry to steal your stuff.
That's certainly something that we can look at. I don't know the answers either. I know
Right.
this was designed back in the late 2000 single years, I believe,
Right.
right?
And I would never suggest getting rid of the vans. I feel like that is the best way to transport those students.
Well, when we talk budget, we
efficiently.
may be talking about buying another
All
van,
right.
so.
There you go. But,
Mrs. Saunders, no.
I mean, obviously, I had parents call me out on Facebook who had concerns about this. And I'm going to be very frank, and I understand people are not going to like this response, but the fact is, a lot of what I heard from parents were, how much of this is a school problem and how much of this is a parent problem?
Thank you.
I mean, parents have to take responsibility. We can put the best signs out, and we can have tons of people out there directing, and we can have the best markings. But if you're a parent and you're not going to follow those rules, you're going to put kids at risk, and I've watched it myself. If you get out of that car in the car loop and you walk your child inside, every single car who's pulled up behind you that is expecting to go forward is now stuck. And I've seen it with my own eyes, with those cars trying to do a 30-point backup to get out, almost cream a student, more than once. We have limited power to try and stop that. That's on you. If you get out of your car and leave your car to walk your child inside, and I've seen it when there was a parking spot 10 feet away, you're putting kids at risk. And we can institute all the policies in the world. It still comes down to you. You have to take that responsibility. Because you know what? Even with the vans there, even with as many students as we have, I've timed it over and over and over again in the peak. If no one's getting out of their car, it's about 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You know how long it is in Florida for my sisters to drop their kids off? 45. That's a big old difference.
And I think, and I go back to what Mrs. Lewis said, one of the pieces is, we're asking for that cooperation and patience and abiding by the rules, but we also do want to thank, because of the number of people we have that do drop their kids off, we have an awful lot of people who are following rules and being safely. So I think we just need to focus on how we can ensure that we're all doing that, and bear in mind that safety is the ultimate concern.
Absolutely.
So, but again, I'll just also close by saying thank you to the parents that did come forth. I know I was reached out to personally and directed it back to our principals, and you know, our staff has really done a good job in trying to be proactive with this problem and responsive to the problem, and we'll take it from here. You have a question?
Just a quick question, and forgive me if you already explained this, but how on the Shore Road, how are drivers gonna know that they can't enter there?
We have not got it yet. We have ordered signage that's going to be placed that gives the times that says entrance only or exit only.
And will there be some kind of barrier or person
No,
there?
no barrier, because that's one thing we talked with Chief Tupper about. We need to make sure that we don't block those off. But one thing Chief Mosier mentioned, at least on Monday, they are going to come with some cones, at least up in the area where Jem was asking about getting into the softball parking lot, to block that off so people know they can't go up there. And whether we can expand that down below, it may require us putting more people outside. You know, I can see Mrs. Lewis going down with a couple of cones down to the Shore Road.
And a sign.
Yeah.
On her rollerblades.
And maybe a megaphone too.
Do you need a volunteer for that?
That's something we talked about, but you know, Chief Tupper was very clear, we need to make sure that we provide emergency access. But signage hopefully will be one thing, and again, will it be effective? It depends upon the response. You know, Mrs. Lewis already talked about one sign up at one end of Newitt Circle. People either don't see it or don't.
Yeah, and I will say there's been cones there too, and that seems to be effective. I mean, I haven't seen anybody run them over.
Yep.
So that you cannot enter Newitt Circle from the Shore Road. But I think it got confusing too, because people weren't sure if they could exit from it, because it was, and it's just signage.
And
Sometimes just
hopefully
doesn't
these
work.
pieces are gonna help
But,
address
yeah.
those issues, and
Absolutely.
again, appreciate everybody for their work on it and trying to make it better and safer. Thank you for indulgence on both of those topics. And that concludes my report, unless you have other questions. Maybe you can make a limit on the time of my reports in future meetings.
Not when there's that much
Okay.
to discuss.
That's right. That needed to be said.
Item 8, committee reports.
None.
I think I'd like to report that we did have a meeting last night on boardsmanship,
Yes.
which was excellent. Item I, old business, we have none. Item J, new business. J2, discussion and consideration of overnight out-of-country trips. A, Ellsworth High School overnight out-of-country travel to Spain.
Before Mrs. Cutney comes up, can I just make a couple, or while she's coming up, that's fine, it won't take that long. Just want to say that with regard to the conversation tonight, obviously, certainly the next trip that's planned, and I believe it's in April, is it not?
No, in June.
It's June, okay, June.
It's in June.
Maybe the coronavirus piece will be taken care of, but certainly what's going on with that can impact some of these conversations. But with any of the conversation and with the memo that I sent you with my recommendation, I just want to be clear that I absolutely support the work that our staff does in planning and providing these opportunities for kids. And the recommendation that I have tonight to approve for planning purposes, but not for signing a contract, is only so that we can get the most up-to-date and current information. And one of the reasons that I really feel strongly about that is, with information that Mr. Clifford and Mrs. Cutney have provided from EF Tours, it seems as though they're becoming a little more, I don't know if lenient is the word, but a little more receptive to understanding that there are some challenges out there. What I want to avoid is for our staff and for our students and families to get to a point, if they make a decision that we really can't send our child on this trip or don't want to, that they're not going to be out money. I know there are insurance policies. Our insurer for the school department is advising that we advise parents to purchase that. But that's the reason for my recommendation, is so that these folks can plan and recruit to get kids to go. But we can iron out these things so that we can do it in an appropriate way. So, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I can speak to EF Tours policy on, their current policy on what they're doing for this year's trip, if you guys would like me to do that. Or if you'd prefer, I just talk about the Spain trip for next year.
I think probably the thing would be with the agenda items, the two trips that are up are the Spain trip and the Central Europe trip.
Mhm.
Let's talk about those and have the board take action on those, and then we could have a little discussion on that, because obviously the trip in June, you know, and I will also say the Skills USA National Competition is another one that we're looking at, what might happen depending upon the outbreak
Right.
and so forth. That might be a worthy discussion afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm asking, thanks for having me tonight, Carrie Cutney. I'm asking to take students to Spain, specifically Madrid and the province of Andalusia, which is the southernmost province in Spain, next April in 2021. And how this particular trip came up, I consider this very much a language tour, very much a literature tour, and very much an architecture and history tour. The province of Andalusia is very unique in Spain because that was where the Moors most heavily occupied and for the longest period of time. So the architecture and the history is very different from the rest of Europe and even the rest of Spain. There's a heavy Arab influence with all of the cathedrals, most of which were conquered mosques. So, for example, the cathedral in Sevilla is a beautiful mosque tower. When the Catholics conquered, they didn't want the mosque, but they could not bear to tear down the tower, so they left this, 9th century tower and built a Gothic cathedral on top of it. So the history is very, very rich. That is where I lived when I lived in Spain, in Sevilla. And Mrs. Corson and I at length discussed where would we like to take students next. We've done Madrid, we've done Barcelona, and some of the more northern, larger urban areas. And we plan on going to Madrid again, so the kids do get a large urban experience, and then to a lot of smaller towns. Granada and Sevilla are cities, but they're significantly smaller. And then we'll also be going to Cadiz, Toledo, and some of the more historic towns. So when we went last year, we did a lot of small towns in southern France, in Provence, and the students loved it. So I kind of took that cue from them that, maybe we shouldn't just do 2 major urban centers. Maybe we should do one and then try to give a little more variety. Ellsworth is a small town, so a lot of our kids felt a little more comfortable there. They loved the city, but it's very overwhelming. And so it's nice to go there for a couple days and then branch out and see other things. So that's really what our plan is. I'm really excited about it. The weather in southern Spain and Andalusia in April is dry and 80 degrees, typically high 70s. If we were going to go in June, we talked about going in June, but it would be significantly hotter. So we thought it would be easier for students to tolerate that in April. It's also a little bit cheaper too, so they will save $400 to $500 by us going in April. So that was part of the plan. Do you have any questions?
How many students are you planning on allowing for this? Like, what's your cap?
Probably around 30, I think. If 35 kids wanted to go, we would definitely find a way to squeeze them in. I believe last year MDI traveled with 80 kids, which is 2 buses. They went to Italy and Greece. And honestly, I think it's fantastic that they have 80 kids that want to go. As the trip organizer, that is a lot of kids. The first year that we went, we had a total of 29 students, and it was manageable. It was. Last year we had, I think, 15 or 16, and it was very comfortable. This year on the Galapagos trip, we have 25 kids registered. So anywhere between 15 and 30, I think, is manageable. The way EF Tourist does it is for every 6 paying travelers, a teacher gets to travel. So a 6-to-1 ratio is very, very reasonable, very comfortable. So we also vet the students pretty heavily for behavior, so that also works in our favor.
And so these will be, you said Spanish language is will be one of the focuses of this trip, so are these mostly or only Spanish students or Spanish-speaking?
Absolutely not. I want all kids to travel, so any student who wants to go can go. If we get more than 30, 32, 35 kids, then we would try to prioritize by how many years of foreign language they've taken and give preference to the Spanish students. That said, we'd also like to, in future years, do more French-heavy trips as well. Last year, we spent more time in Paris and Provence, and I did that knowing that this year we'd be speaking Spanish and the year after. So, you know, and we went to Quebec this year too. Madame took a trip to Quebec City. So we're trying to strike a balance between the two languages.
I think the Spanish, I think where you're going is perfect for both because the Cantalone, you know, they speak a mix. It's a French and it's a Spanish. You don't always know which word they're going to use for what till you're there. But I think it's a very broad, you know, applicable place to go for both of your, you know, languages that you guys are here with, I know. But and the history, we don't get, you know, we just don't have enough time to teach our kids all we want to teach them about foreign history, and we forget this. The Spanish, you know, they explored so much, so many traditions and things actually came from there, and you don't really talk about it till you're there on a tour, and they're pointing it out and they're talking about it. When you see it, you live it, you feel it, you remember it. These kids that get to go, it's such an incredible, enriching opportunity that they'll remember for a lifetime.
Right, absolutely. Well, and the reality too, in the European Union, so many people speak multiple languages. When we were in southern France, I spoke a lot of Spanish. I was surprised, but I mean, it's right by the Spanish border. So, you know, I shouldn't have been surprised, but it's really amazing how multilingual they are.
Right. And even if you just try to speak it, but not very well like me, they're like, oh, no, I'll speak English for you. We had no problem with people conversing, even as I am epically bad at it.
I'm sure you're not. It's all true, though we try to not advertise that to the students that a lot of the tourist areas speak English so that they actually use their language skills. But, you know, it's really fun to watch them be bold and brave and, you know, sit at a cafe and order in the target language and, you know, to actually get the experience. It's really fun. It's really great to see.
I did notice the dates too. So this is over April vacation?
Yes.
Of 2021?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and they give us a window of like what days we would depart and what days we would return. So I want to say the date that I chose to leave was the Friday before vacation, and I can't remember what day it is. It was either
Returning the
April
Monday
16th
after.
and then we would return, I believe, on the Sunday after.
then
So
This
they
one
would-
had returning Monday. I think
Okay.
leaving on Saturday.
leaving on Saturday, yeah,
Returning
one,
Monday.
but they would only miss one day of school.
One day of
That's
school.
that's the goal. So.
The other thing that goes along with that is when you look at what goes into the planning for these trips, the number of standards that we're charged with providing students opportunities to master are really included heavily in these trips. The staff really does a great job incorporating that. So you look at the
Educational
balance, you look at the
standard, yeah.
balance of a day or a part of day of school with what they're going to get out of it.
Yeah,
And
right.
to me, that's
Right.
that's a good trade-off.
And I know Mrs. Almler is going to be talking about a trip to Eastern Europe. I think it's fantastic that we are doing trips. We're not in competition. The more opportunities that we can offer students, really the better for each kid. You know, and really, the kid who really wants to go to Prague is not the kid who wants to go to Granada. And so really, we're just sort of hitting niche markets for all students, and that's really valuable. So ideally, what I'd like to do is have like a big fair at the beginning of the fall and sort of say, like, let's have a travel bonanza, and, you know, theater's going to New York, and Mrs. Almler's going to Germany, and Mrs. Kors and I are going to Spain, and, you know, really get kids excited about travel. So that's my grand vision for Ellsworth travel. So.
I think it's great that we're providing these opportunities for them.
Right.
I was very fortunate last April, I happened to meet up very briefly
That's right. That's right. We saw you
in
in Barcelona.
for like 25 minutes in that plaza of the main church of Barcelona.
Yeah, the
But it was,
cathedral.
but just the kids were having such an awesome time, and the teachers were having a great time, and it was really great to see you all experiencing that, and interacting with each other.
And to be perfectly frank, it's amazing professional development for Lindsay and I to be able to go and just speak Spanish for 10 days in a row. You can't really get that in Ellsworth. So it really, it's really fantastic. So.
Yep. I move that we approve the Ellsworth High School overnight out-of-country travel to Spain as presented for planning purposes only.
I second that motion.
May I add to the discussion?
Yes.
Please note that the planning purposes only is until we can identify what we need, and you need, as a board, need to identify,
For a contract.
and make a formal, full approval as soon as possible, because I know that, I think there are price breaks that you get the earlier that you sign on with EF Tours, is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not intended to drag this out, it's
Right.
Yep.
just to make sure we're comfortable as a board doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none? All those in favor? 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any further questions about any other policies?
Well, let's do the other trip, and then it might be a good idea just to do a brief overview of that, because with the trip that you've got coming up in June, it would be helpful for the board to know.
Yeah,
Because I
absolutely.
think presumably this virus issue is going to pass. So it would seem that the trips that we're talking about tonight and approving tentatively tonight are less likely to be impacted, whereas the trip you've got coming up is more likely.
Absolutely. Okay.
So let's do the next one, and then we can have a brief discussion, if that's okay with the board.
Perfect, thanks.
While Mrs. Almore is coming up, the other reason for the tentative piece on this is, her trip is proposed to be part of the year-end studies program, which is a program that you as a board are going to get an overview of at your next workshop on the 24th, and be asked to vote on at the April meeting, because there are credits and elective credits that would be attached to some of those components of the program. And because her trip would be part of that, it really needs to have that look as well.
Good evening, I'm Heidi Omler. Thank you for this time tonight. So, my trip is actually student-generated. In my Holocaust and Genocide Studies course for the past couple of years, I've had students ask me if I would take them to Europe. And the first couple times I kind of laughed it off, and then this year I have a pretty serious group in that Holocaust class, and they're like, "We're really serious, will you take us?" And so I thought about it, I went in and talked with Mr. Clifford, and so I went back to the kids and looked at EF Tours to see what they had, if they even had a trip that even would address that. They have one that actually they refer to as, the Holocaust. It really wasn't what we were looking for. I have been to Europe myself several times and have been to the majority of the former concentration camps. And my personal recommendation would not be to expose the students to too many of them in one sitting. So the trip that we chose actually has some Holocaust, but it also has a lot of other, certainly historical, but just other items for the students to visit. And so I showed it to the kids, and they were like, "Seriously, will you take us?" So that's kind of where this started. They really want to go. They really want to be able to see a lot of the places that they've learned about. Auschwitz, I have been myself, and until you have been there, you can read all the books you want. And you really just don't really understand it. So one of the days that we'd be gone, we would be at Auschwitz. But we would start in Berlin and spend some time at what's left of the Berlin Wall. There's a couple of museums there, obviously a lot of the architecture. And then just outside of Berlin is the former Camp Sachsenhausen, which was the model camp that was built. And we would go there, and then to Prague. where there are some camps, but we will not be going to the former camp there. And then to Poland, to Krakow, one of the very few European cities that was not destroyed during the war because the Nazis had their headquarters there. It's beautiful. And from there to Auschwitz, and then to Hungary. So it's also one of the few tours that EF Tours does that is 4 countries, which for me at least was very attractive as well. So the student, we'd be going, as Superintendent Higgins said, during the YES program, which would be somewhere around that 3rd week of June, whenever, and of course those dates are tentative, obviously. The idea is that they would, like if they had stayed at school, and credit would be assigned by attending this trip as well. So by looking at it this far in advance, because we're talking about June of 2021, it allows the students time to obviously make the payments. The sooner they sign up, the smaller the payments are, but kids could even sign up in September, and that would not, be an issue. Overall, they have a lot of time, to look into it, and think about it, and then, and I'm sure Mrs. Cutney will address this as well, if something were to happen. Fortunately, EF Tours is set up so that kids can pull out of the trip without any, I think it's $95, the like sign-up fee or whatever they call it, that it ends up costing them if they do pull out in the end, so. But the itinerary is, I think it's on page 6. I apologize, it didn't photocopy that well. But you can see the variety of things that the students will be, and again, not just Holocaust centered. The other piece of this is that students who will be signing up who have either not taken my Holocaust class or really don't have a lot of background, I'm going to be working with all the students, but certainly with those that don't have any background to kind of catch them up to speed. As I have said to students, I can't explain Auschwitz to you at Auschwitz. So they would need a little background as to what they're getting themselves into. I would never take a student there without some background knowledge. And that would be something that I would present to their parents as well. And certainly their parents would be more than welcome to come, to any of those meetings that we would hold. But I feel very strongly about preparing them, what they're stepping into before we went. So that's our plan. Questions that anyone has?
So you would be traveling to some countries that the language spoken there is not languages that we offer at our.
Correct.
Yeah. So how do the students manage that?
I have been to all of the countries except for Hungary, and English is spoken widely.
Yeah.
I don't speak anything, well, barely. I speak English some days, but I only speak English. I'm working on my German. It's very slow. And I have never had any trouble, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About how many students do you think you're going to cap this trip at?
When I first spoke with the tour director, I'm looking at 24. If I get a dozen, I will be absolutely thrilled. But I'd like to think that we could take 24. I have chaperones enough, 6 chaperones, so for 30 students. But we'll see obviously how that pans out. But a dozen or 2, so.
So you'll fly there, obviously, take a bus, or is that what your tour is once you're there?
Yes.
You're flying to Germany.
The train, and this is kind of a side note, but of all of the industries that were involved in the Holocaust in Germany, the train company is the only one who has never admitted any part of it. And so we don't take the train. And so I explained that to the tour company, and I would feel very strongly about that. And they said that's no problem at all. So it's buses.
So they'll take
Yeah, it's buses. Yep, it's not a problem. Yep. So the only flying we do is flying into Berlin, and then home from Budapest. Yeah, so there's no flying in Europe at all, so. And it is 10 days. I probably should have mentioned that it is 10 days, yes. Sorry about that.
Ready for a motion? Sure. I move that we approve the Ellsworth High School overnight out-of-country travel to Central Europe as presented for planning purposes only.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Ong.
Thank you.
Great opportunities for our students.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And would the board like to take a couple of minutes just to get a quick update? I did provide you with some information in your packets with regard to the policies. I think there's a piece of information that's more current that Mr. Clifford sent me yesterday that is probably what you wanted to talk about, I presume.
Yes, definitely.
It's where they seem to lighten up their expectations a little.
Right, and I just want to make it super clear that none of us have any intentions of taking anyone to anywhere unsafe. We're not 22-year-old teachers. We're middle-aged moms, and our kids are in the ESD school system, and we don't want anything to happen to anybody's kids. So let's all make that very clear. So for starters, you can cancel an EF tour at any time. They have, for under normal circumstances, a schedule of cancellation fees. So the closer you are typically to the trip, the more they're going to charge you to cancel. Or the less you'll get back, I guess is the better way to phrase it. Because they recognize the coronavirus is so atypical, for the entire month of March, they have allowed anyone traveling at all in the next 6 months to just go ahead and cancel, and they get everything back, except for the $95 deposit and the cost of the insurance, which is like $165, I think. It's not huge money. So that alone is pretty impressive. They have a second policy, which, to be perfectly frank, is one of the reasons why I chose EF Tours when I was doing the research on which tour company would I prefer. They happen to be the largest and the oldest tour company, and because of that, they have a lot of money. They're really powerful. They're like a Fortune 500 company. Well, maybe not. That I don't know. But they have like a pretty heavy financial backing. With that comes the ability to do whatever they need to do to keep people safe and to keep families happy. So they have this policy called the Peace of Mind policy, where up until 45 days before the trip, so for us, we depart on June 20th, so May 7th is the 45th day before the trip. We as a group, no matter what happens, we can decide we're not comfortable with traveling. And while they won't just give people cash back, they will offer at no charge to reschedule our trip to whenever we feel comfortable. So, you know, if we decide, and we includes the administrators of the school, that, you know, hey, we're just not doing this, we can reschedule the trip like in a year, and that is a possibility. They do offer also, if we as a group decide to reroute the trip. I don't know if that really makes sense in a global pandemic, but let's say there were a terror attack or something like that, then that's a really good option. And they also, like if we decide, you know what, we don't want to reschedule, we just don't want to go through with this, they will give each student a transferable travel voucher with EF. So they could transfer that, like whatever the amount was they paid into the Galapagos trip to the next year's trip or the year after. So a student could choose Heidi's trip or a student next year, or they could choose the Spain trip for next year. For the graduating seniors, their travel voucher could work towards college programs, college age programs. The nice thing about the transferable voucher is that they can basically sell them to other students and get their money back. So, you know, at the end of the day, those are really good options, and not all of the tour companies offer that much. One other thing, that the State Department rates every country at a level of risk on a 1 to 4 level. So EF does not travel anywhere that's a level 3 or 4. So for example, you know, even before Italy closed the country down, the minute it hit level 3, they pulled out and said, no one is going to Italy. Like, now you have to put in your peace of mind policy and decide what do you want to do. And so that hasn't happened. Right now, Ecuador is currently at a level 2, so the trip is on as scheduled. Unless parents say, you know, as of before May 7th, we don't feel comfortable going, we need to have a group discussion and decide if we want to use one of those other options. So.
Thank you. Can I just clarify one thing?
Sure, please.
The concerns about this and the way that this was approved is not in any way to be inferred that there's a concern that you or your colleagues are selecting unsafe places. It's not that.
Oh, I understand entirely.
It's the virus, it's the terrorists, it's those
Right.
types of things.
Of course.
Not
Absolutely.
at all. We know that you folks are planning good, quality, outstanding experiences for the kids.
Absolutely. Well, and there's, the reality is there's so much you can't control.
Right.
There's so many variables. Like, no one really knows. It could be fine in June. It could be not fine.
Exactly.
Nobody knows. So it's really nice to know that we have these options in case things don't go the way we want to. I have to say, and this was just sheer luck, I'm really glad we did not plan a European tour for this April vacation. It was a really good year to pick June in the middle of the Pacific. So that makes me feel like there's some kind of, divine intervention going on.
So I have a question.
Sure.
If, with the Peace of Mind program, if you had a student who just decided that the risk, the parents decided, how does that affect your program and your pricing? Does that change anything?
So if a
or are you
student
already in the
cancels, does it change everybody else's price?
Right.
No.
No.
And the minute you sign up and register and pay your $95,
Mm-hmm.
the price is locked in forever. So if we only get 6 kids, I take
Then you
6
just go with
kids,
6
and
kids.
that's what their
Yeah.
price is.
Great.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this helps anybody out there, but we've had 2 different family members on 2 different trips have to enact these policies, unfortunately. And both companies paid out 100%. Like, I have not had anybody who bought insurance for any of these trips that had any problem in the end.
Yeah.
That's something.
I actually build the insurance into the price of the trip because it's just too much money to
Right.
let anybody gamble on. So I just say, look what you've purchased. You also get this great insurance. And the insurance covers other things too, like if a student has a medical emergency or, if your luggage is lost and you have to buy clothing for X number of days, like if you save the receipts, they'll reimburse you. So they really do everything that they can. We've had EF say to me, if this kid cancels, this is in, trips past when there was no emergency. But if this kid cancels, they're not gonna get their money back, and they end up giving their money back. They really do whatever, they go way above and beyond what I have expected of them as a company, so it's worked out very well.
Thank you.
Thank you for the follow-up.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no problem.
That's
Anytime.
great.
Yes, feel free to email me, and I'll keep you updated with regards to how things change over the
Maybe
next.
before May 7th.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely.
April meeting.
Make sure you know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Item J3, consideration of amendment to the 403B plan.
And while I know you've all read through every page of the attachment that was provided to you, just to do a couple of quick pieces. Number one, the purpose of this amendment is a change in law. What there was for our 403B plan is to amend the plan to implement changes to the Hardship Distribution Administration. New regulations state that when seeking a hardship distribution from a 403B plan, the employee must certify in writing to the school unit the employee does not have other cash reasonably available to satisfy the hardship. In addition, school units are now prohibited from suspending employees' 403B salary deferrals after receiving a hardship distribution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, good night.
And one of the things that we learned in working with the attorney to help us with this motion, this is a plan that is carried over from when we were in the RSU. The plan was not previously amended as required under the HARD Act to protect retirement benefits for certain employees called into active duty. So this amendment that you're being asked to consider tonight will address both of those issues. So for procedural pieces, the third page in your packet is the actual motion. And if you look at the recommended motion on your pink minutes, it's reflected so that the entire motion does not need to be read. Although if there are any of you who would like to do that motion and read the entire thing, certainly you can do that, or you may do that.
I move that we approve the amendment to 403B plan as presented at this meeting.
Second.
Jen?
Yeah.
Just hide it.
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Thank you.
5-0. Discussion and consideration of superintendent of schools contract.
Do you want to introduce that? I move that we amend the superintendent of schools contract in accord with the terms and conditions of employment as recommended by the board.
Second.
Discussion?
Hearing none? All those in favor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan, for staying on.
Yeah. Number,
May I say this? I'd like to stay on even longer.
yeah.
Talk about that next year.
Item 5, negotiations update.
Yes, we've continued to meet with the teachers and have another session scheduled for next week. And soon we will begin collective bargaining with the Ed Tech Association.
Okay. Item 6, budget update.
Budget update, and I'm looking at the clock, you know, you have a 2-hour
yeah.
limit on your meetings, so that self-imposed limit on a presentation, not a problem, we'll make it work. This information was sent to you via email this afternoon because we were getting the final touches on it. So what was included for you was a quick update that I'm going to go over, but also a draft of the budget detail. Again, we won't go through all the lines in this, but the intent of tonight is just to give you an update of where the process is and what some of the highlights are. It's for you as a board, a full board, but it's also for the benefit of our community. Much of this information has been shared in very general terms with the City Council's Finance Committee. It has been refined and changed a little bit since our meeting with them, but I think the next appropriate piece is for the entire board. So on March 3rd and 5th, the School Board's Finance Committee, Mrs. Thomas, Mr. Hudson, met with all the building administrators and department heads to hear their respective budget proposals and presentations. I felt the process was highly informative as committee members and presenters engaged in excellent conversation, a lot of questions asked, a lot of information shared, and I think it provided that committee with a deeper understanding of what's included in the initial draft of the expenditure side of the budget. Now, please note as I go through these and as you look at the figures in the detailed document, that we know going through the budget development process from historical perspectives that not all the items that are currently in here are going to be there at the end of the budget process. While it would be nice to be able to do that, we do understand that resources are finite and that we're going to have to prioritize to a certain extent. But that being said, also note that this information does not include figures on the revenue side of the ledger. As we've explained to you folks before, we do have the subsidy information from the Department of Education through the ED 279, which covers your subsidy for K through 12, your debt service reimbursement, and your CTE allocation. A couple things to remember. One, the legislature is still in session until April 15th, and other parts of our revenue figures are contingent upon the final passage of the state's budget, but also the information we receive on the number of students we anticipate coming to HCTC and to Ellsworth High School next year. And certainly, I know Mr. Clifford is here tonight, Mrs. Bowles is not able to be. They're still working on their recruiting tours. Mr. Clifford has the 8th grade step-up night, so there are a couple of big dates left for us to get that information. So what you're not going to get tonight is the budget proposal with a projected increase and a projected impact on city taxpayers. We're not at that point. This is just a quick overview. So with that being said, and noting I've got 12 minutes left, areas of focus for the FY21 budget include, again, addressing changes and increases in staffing and shifts in staffing to meet enrollment shifts, increases, trends, and student needs, and I'll talk a little bit about those as I go through this. Also to address increased needs for students. We have a number of students who are currently with us or who are joining us or who have joined us over the course of this year who require additional special services. We've also dealt with in our school system, as have school systems all over the state and country, with increased social emotional needs being exhibited by students that we have, and also increased needs and challenges around trauma. And we've done a lot of work with trauma supportive schools with our staff, so there are pieces in this budget to address those. As you have to do when you've got a transportation fleet the size of ours, you're looking at updating that fleet on a regular basis. We've been very fortunate to have your support and the council and voters' support. So we'll talk a little bit about that. This also includes the proposed addition of 2 new programs at Hancock County Technical Center. You know, we provide outstanding programming and opportunities for our students that attend there. We're looking at a hospitality and tourism program and a cybersecurity program. This budget reflects that. It also reflects support for our ongoing long-term facilities and maintenance plan. So with that being said, just a quick thing by cost center, and you're familiar with these cost centers. First, under regular instruction, Looking at the following pieces on staffing. Number one, we just talked about a Spanish trip. We're looking at taking one of the positions we have as a Spanish teacher, foreign language, it's just 0.5 FTE, and making that a full-time position. Mr. Clifford has provided information on the anticipated numbers of students who will be taking Spanish 1 next year, which makes that a necessity. What that will leave is a half-time gifted and talented vacancy, presuming their current staff member transitions to that. We're also proposing adding a full-time vocal instructor and music teacher to be shared 50-50 between EHS vocal instructor and EMS music teacher. We're looking at, if you look at current scores on the MEAs and you look at scores of math over the past several years, not just in Ellsworth, but statewide and nationwide, math is a challenge area. We've been talking about this for a couple of years. This budget includes 2 positions, a math interventionist for grades K through 8 and a math interventionist for grades 9 through 12. And again, you're all familiar with the fact that we have 4 literacy intervention positions, and we do very well there. We need to focus a similar amount of attention on math. We're also including stipends for before-school coverage from 7 to 7:30 a.m., and this is predominantly at the middle school because we do have a number of students and families who drop kids off before we ask them to. I don't even have to look to know that Mrs. Lewis is out there looking at me because she has said she will never turn a kid away from a school, and I happen to agree with her. Is that a fair statement, Mrs. Lewis?
Absolutely.
Also, when you look at our enrollment levels and enrollment trends, this budget includes funds for an additional second-grade classroom teacher. And when we look at our target ratios, that indicates that we need that position. Also, looking at stipends for an after-school program for the middle school. And this is something Ms. Gabinelli has been working on to provide opportunities for students who need additional support outside of the regular school day. That all falls under your regular education program. And again, those are the highlights for what we're looking to add. Okay? It still goes along with the fact that we're still providing all of the other programming that we do. Under special education, this budget includes proposed funding for 6 new EdTech 3s at EEMS. It also includes the addition of 1 full-time equivalent resource room teacher. When we look at administrative assistant support, this is a conversation we've been having over the course of the year. This budget overall includes the addition of 2 full-time administrative assistant positions. And I'll touch on these in a couple of different categories. Currently, we have a position that supports our state agency client population, which is housed in the superintendent's office, students who attend the Kids Peace program here in Ellsworth. That's a half-time position. The other half-time of that position supports instructional technology and our quality of our data that we use in registering and maintaining our student records. What we're looking to do is change that particular position to still reflect a half-time state agency client support, but make the other half-time special education administrative assistant to address the volumes of paperwork that are required of our special education teaching staff. Now, all teachers have a lot of paperwork responsibilities. Special education has a higher level of that. So this is something that we've been looking at to try to reduce that burden on our teachers so they can spend more time focusing on what they can do with the students. I'll talk about the technology half of that in just a minute. We're also looking at adding 1 additional full-time administrative assistant position to focus solely on special education for the purposes I just described. That position and a half total would be spread across all of our schools. Safety care training is training that we have for, we don't want to restrain students, but we train our teachers and ed techs how not to have to restrain and address and bring the students down without that, but it also trains them how to restrain. We've been trying to do that training throughout the course of the year, our opening days, on our PLC days, which presents a couple of challenges. One is the people that are doing that training do not get to participate in what we're providing for our in-service activities. And 2, you may not get to some of those staff members until later in the year. So what we're proposing is funding in this budget. We're talking between $10,000 and $15,000 to provide that training over a couple of days in the summer. We think it will be money well spent. It will have our staff prepared and ready to go from day one, and it will allow all of our staff to participate in professional development. And that just reminded me, there's another piece that goes back under regular education. As you know, our pre-K program is a collaborative partnership with Down East Community Partners. It's, in essence, 4 days a week for students. It's not quite a full day. The 5th day is for staff. For the past couple of years, we've not been able to fill that program to full capacity, and what we're learning is, one of the reasons is, with the schedule that we have, it presents challenges with parents for transportation and childcare. So we've worked out a model with Down East Community Partners where the school department would be taking on additional supporting funds of that to make it a 5-day-a-week, full-day program, which would provide opportunities for us to get to the maximum level of students, which is 18. So we're talking probably between $20,000 and $25,000 for that. But when you look at the value of the pre-K year and early educational opportunities for students, it's beneficial to kids moving forward. So this budget includes funding to support that. It's also important to know that Down East Community Partners is also looking at the potential for some funding that would go along to offset that, and whatever they received would be used to reduce that figure. You know, it's truly a partnership with them. It's not a one-sided piece. It's a very, very solid program. Mrs. Lewis? Okay. Also in special education, we're looking at a projected increase. You know, as we provide for services for our students who have special needs as identified by IEPs, we start with the least restrictive environment, which starts out within our schools, within our classrooms, within our programs. The opposite end of that spectrum is when you have to provide those students a program outside of the district. Right now, we're projecting an increase of the students that we had budgeted for this year by 1.5, so that would represent an increase. That's one of those ones that we'll look at between now and the budget approval time, because you really don't know. You could find out that you have 3 kids move in between now and June. You could find out that you have no kids and everyone moves away. So that would cover special education. Career and technical education, I've already touched on it. 2 new programs. One of the instructors, hospitality and tourism, the salary and benefits will be funded through the Carl Perkins federal grant funding for up to 3 years. The funding for the cybersecurity program, instructors included in the local budget. This budget also includes funding to support renovation of the current carpentry classroom space so that it can be used to support these programs. It also provides funding to support the startup of programs, textbooks, technologies, supplies. Other instruction, which is your after-school program, your summer school program, and co- and extracurricular activities. It's a smaller projected increase there, but we're talking about the addition of 2 new stipends at the high school. One, we've had a JV tennis program for years, but our coach has been a volunteer coach. We're requesting funding to support that as a JV position. Also, the Maine Principals Association has sanctioned a new program called eSports. Anybody familiar with eSports? It's competitive online gaming. So we're looking to add a stipend for a position for that for next school year with a great level of student interest. There are also athletic supplies at EEMS that contribute to this. We're looking at new cheering mats. They haven't been replaced in a number of years. And also the uniform replacement cycle requires I believe it's 4 sets of uniforms. Also includes funding for stipends for advisors and programs that have been voluntary in previous years. We have a number of our staff members who step forward and volunteer to support these programs to get them started. And we feel it's important to recognize them. So when you look at the National Science Honor Society and the GSDA Club, we're looking to include funding to support stipends for those advisors. Student and staff support, which includes guidance, which includes nursing, which includes instructional technology, which includes professional development. A number of increases looking at there. One of them is, with the number of teachers that we've hired over the past several years, many of our teachers are taking advantage of the provision that we have in support through enrolling in graduate programs. It's beneficial to them, which in turn will benefit our students in their learning and improvement. We're looking at an increase there because we have a lot of teachers taking advantage of that opportunity. We're also looking at adding, initially it was going to be administrative assistant support for our school nursing program, but what we're actually looking for is now providing the equivalent of a half-time person, whether that's going to be a registered nurse, a CNA, or a CRMA, to focus specifically on medication administration. And the short of it is this: with the coronavirus piece emerging, it really brought this to light. We have a large population of students at EMS. You heard Mrs. Lewis say 850. That's down from 950 last week.
Might be up next week.
Okay. There's a story behind that, which
Tonight it's 850.
But when you look at the number of students, it's a large volume of students anyway. But when you look at the students who are coming through that are well students, they're not in there for an illness. It might be from medication administration. It might be from a bump on the playground, falling in physical education, something along those lines. We also have a number of students coming through who have influenza symptoms and those types of things. One of the challenges is separating those two so there's not a crossover. But when you're looking at medication administration, that's a challenge in itself. So we're looking at providing some support there that will address the medication administration piece. And our nurses, Mrs. Reinig, Mrs. Sandone, are looking at what that would require for certification. And I think it's a very reasonable request for us to include funding for that. The other piece, and this is the final administrative assistant position we're talking about, under student and staff support, half of a position was dedicated to a data support technician position for the instructional technology. One of the things that we're looking at is making that a full-time position, which is the addition of a half-time position, to support a move to centralized registration for students. Despite the fact that our staff members really do a good job managing the volumes of data, we feel that centralizing this function will allow us to improve our data even more. And it's important to know that that data accuracy is critical because many times it leads to whether you bill for tuition for a student or not, whether you receive state subsidy for a student or not. It's critical that we can be as accurate as possible. And I think it would also address workflow challenges that we have in other areas for administrative assistants. System administration, which is you folks, which is myself, which is your business office. We're looking at a relatively small increase there. Legal and audit services, again, we base our use of legal on our past year's history. We're fine-tuning that. Audit services, we also expect an increase. Wages and insurance, and by the way, this budget draft reflects a projected 10% increase in insurance premiums. We won't know the figure until the 1st of April. Cross your fingers and let's hope that we're as fortunate as we have been in the past couple of years. But also software maintenance in the business office. School administration, which is your principal's offices. One of them are projections for a new K-4 principal wages and insurance. Another one is professional development activities scheduled at the middle school and the high school, which includes a follow-up on the Rachel's Challenge activities and some of those types of initiatives, but also funding to support, next year is the 25th anniversary of the opening of Ellsworth High School. Mrs. Wright at the high school is working on some plans for some celebratory activities over the course of next year. And also, next year is the 10-year NEASC accreditation visiting team coming in, and that typically falls with it for 2.5 to 3 days of lodging and meals expenses for a visiting team to come in and take a look at what we've done with our self-study. Facilities and maintenance, which is always I need consensus from the board to continue for 2 or 3 minutes because it's 8:30.
Yeah.
Unless you'd like to stop and we can do this next month.
Move that we extend the meeting time to allow the superintendent to finish his report and then to wrap up.
Okay. It doesn't have to be a second, it just has to be a consensus. Does everybody agree?
Yes.
I'll talk fast.
I'm in.
Facilities maintenance, no increases in staffing, but a transition of one full-time custodial position to be a maintenance position that would provide additional ground support in the spring and fall. Mr. Turnbull has done an excellent job preparing a budget that includes priorities. The funding for this includes 1 year of a 4-year progression of replacing the roof at Ellsworth High School. It's about $120, I wish it was $120, $120,000 project. The total cost over 4 or 5 years would be over $450,000. It will include funding for the Del Luz Stadium lighting project. Right now, there's $100,000 in capital reserve. We're anticipating an additional $110,000 to support the light fixtures and standards. What is not included in the budget right now, but we're looking at potential sources of funding, whether it's current fund balance or other sources. So that may or may not end up in the budget. Also included in Mr. Turnbull's budget is something required by the DOE, furniture and fixtures, okay, that go in for classrooms. For example, new furniture and fixtures that go with the CTE program fall under the maintenance budget. So if at Ellsworth High School, Ellsworth Elementary Middle School, that's what happens when I talk fast, with teachers requesting replacements of desks and tables and chairs and so forth, that falls under the maintenance budget. That's something that's changed over the past couple of years. This is where it's supposed to be placed, so it will reflect an increase there. Mr. Turnbull is requesting a replacement pickup truck similar to the transportation fleet. Your maintenance fleet also needs to be current. This pickup truck, and he would be replacing an older one that's 10 years old, but because of the condition that it's in, Mr. Turnbull has procured what is anticipated to be a very healthy trade-in, and that will update his fleet for the next several years. Also, a variety of maintenance equipment to support his maintenance staff in terms of additions and replacements. Transportation, we're looking at right now one additional driver for our wheelchair-equipped bus, a new bus purchased through the Maine Department of Education subsidy program. And again, the 5-year lease purchase payment for that will replace one lease purchase that is expiring this year. We try to do that. But what we also have is, as you know, we purchased a propane bus this year through the VW grant. We were successful, Mr. Saunders, in being awarded another one. So right now, this includes funding for 20% of the cost of another propane bus for next year. And that will be, those will both be replacements of current buses, right? Yep. Does not include funding, but over the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to need to upgrade our radio communication system and our buses to coordinate with the new city, police and fire department systems. We're talking about between $23,000 and $25,000 total. In an ideal world, there'd be enough funding to support that this year. We anticipate phasing in over the next 2 to 3 years. And right now, we're looking at one 7-passenger van for special transportation needs. Right now, it's anticipated to be a replacement for one that will not be serviceable next year. And we're trying to nail down whether or not we're going to need an additional van for needs, which would also require an additional driver. We haven't nailed that down yet. Food service is pretty quick. Replacement of some cafeteria furniture, and one of the pieces that we're working on is an updated wage and benefit package for staff. We are operating on what was the wage and benefit package that we inherited from the RSU. So it's time that we look at that, and we've engaged in conversations with that group. Adult education, Mrs. Sargent is looking for increased instructional hours for academic and career pathways, the equivalent of 480 hours. An hour a week for clinical supervision for a nursing program, and an hour per week for social worker that could be provided through the Ellsworth High School HCTC staff. She's also looking at, if you visited her location up at the Mill Mall, they really make great use of the limited space that they have. They really need more space. So she's worked out a proposal with the Mill Mall to add classroom space. So that is a very quick and brief overview of the major highlights of what we're looking at for increases in the budget. It's intended to provide you and the viewing public with an overview of the priorities. And again, the priorities of our school department are reflected in what our spending plan is. It's in no way intended to be a final version or to indicate a final proposed expenditure level or impact on the citizens through property taxes. That will be forthcoming. So I've done that really quickly. I hope that was quick enough. Any questions?
Not yet.
Not yet. I'm sure there will be some, and this won't be the last time we talk about budget.
Thank you. Calendar and announcements. School board workshop will be Tuesday, March 24th, 2020, yes?
And may I just let the board know what will be on that agenda? I referenced the year-end studies program for the high school. Mr. Clifford, Mrs. Wright, and some staff members will be with you that night to present that program and talk about the YES program, and talk about what they're proposing for the end of this school year. They piloted some of these activities last year, and it went very well, but this year they're looking to add elective credit to it. The other thing that we're asking them to do is give you a fairly detailed update on the progress that they're making with the academies that we're talking about implementing the following year. Again, that's a STEM academy and also a humanities academy. So that should be a very interesting and informational meeting for you, and it will prepare you to vote on the YES program at the April meeting. Thank you, Mrs. Thomas.
Okay, that will be at 6 o'clock in the Ellsworth School Department Conference Room.
Yes.
And the next school board meeting here will be April 14th, 2020, Ellsworth City Hall Council Chambers at 6:30. And the next item is adjournment.
Motion having no further business to adjourn the board meeting.
That's Mr. Hudson.
I second that.
Mrs. Miller.
Discussion? Hearing none? All those in favor? 5-0.
So thank you. Thank you, everybody.
8:30.
8:38.